What's going on, everybody? C4 here. Welcome back to today's video where we're going to be taking a look at my top 10 underrated prospects for the upcoming 2019 NFL Draft. We will have an overrated video later on in the week, and that overrated video kind of is ranked, like, you know, the number 10 all the way to number 1. It's kind of, you know, my less overrated to the most overrated. Whereas today in the underrated, it's just generally all these guys are underrated. No one's more underrated than the other. And I kind of just went through my 7-round mock draft Excel document and kind of looked where I had guys that I thought were going to be tremendous value where they're going. And hopefully, if your team drafts one of these guys that are going to be talked about here on my underrated list, you're going to be getting a starter. And I'm going to look like a smartass from telling you guys that they're great value pickups. So without further ado, jumping in at number 10, I have Snell, the running back from Kentucky. He was running back 1 for a lot of people entering this year. For me, he was running back 1 at times, you know, within the top 5, fluctuating. Had A+ production in the SEC, which is where I was more so grading him. And then I actually kind of feel like people that have been scouting running backs for a long time, you overvalue that old school style that is really being transitioned out right now in the day's NFL. And that's kind of what Snell kind of fell victim to. You know, he can't really catch out of the backfield. He has a lot of miles on those legs. And he ran a 4.66 at the combine, so he's not really a great athlete. So when you look at what you're going to get a downhill thumper, which is kind of being phased out. You get a guy that's, you know, for his size, not particularly amazing in pass protection, but he's not bad and clearly better than some of the smaller backs in this year's draft class. But I personally feel like when I look at Snell, man, if he goes to the right system, if he goes to the right running back by committee where, you know, maybe because of an injury or something like that, he gets to be that lead back, I can definitely see him being a 1,000-yard running back in the NFL. But he is really scheme dependent. But if he goes to the right team, and I know a lot of teams in the NFL, I would like to hesitate to guess maybe at least half are currently running a committee-style system for the running backs. The fact that Snell is consistently going later in day 3, rounds 5 to 7, you know, the fact that you can get a guy that has that 1,000-yard potential, I think that is a prime candidate to start off the underrated list of prospects in this 2019 draft. A 1,000-yard back in day 3, obviously, has to go to the right scheme fit, but we're starting with Snell, and I think he is getting really slept on because everyone wants the flashy guy that can catch it and do it all, the big fast 40-yard dash time, but the old school grinders can still get the job done. Moving into number 9 on my underrated list, I have Cameron Smith, the linebacker from USC. A lot of mock drafts as an undrafted free agent. Like, I'll tell you this, the site that I use for a lot of my draft content this year, great reference site, the Draft Network, they don't even have him listed as a prospect. You know what I'm saying? And like most mock drafts around the web, he's just undrafted. You know, maybe you might see some teams having him go in 7th round, 6th round, special teamer because he's an old school style linebacker. But then when he came to the combine and tested better than expected, running a 4.69, 39-inch vertical for just over a 4-second shuttle, 4.23 shuttle, that's really good. Coupled with the fact that he has a lot of leadership traits, high IQ, he's a strong tackler. I mean, he's a good linebacker. He's going to be one of those guys that's going to go, I personally think, you know, 4 or 5, somewhere like early day 3, and be able to start sooner than later. Probably get on the field quite a bit as a rookie, you know, along the lines of maybe Josie Jewell last year, who went to the Denver Broncos and actually played a lot of meaningful snaps for the Broncos for, you know, points and times during last season, and probably will have a bigger role this year now that the Denver Broncos have moved on from Braden Marshall. He might be that starter next to Todd Davis. So I think a guy like Cameron Smith, the fact that, you know, there's just a disrespect amongst the draft community in regards to Cameron Smith is ridiculous. I mean, he was like one of the most hyped linebackers as a true freshman for USC. He had like a couple huge interceptions, a pick 6, was making tackles all over the field, and then there's more by more people just forgot about him a little bit. I think that's a lot of blatant disrespect for a guy that I think is definitely one of the better value pickups at the linebacker spot in this year's draft. Going to number 8, I have Foster Moreau, tight end from LSU. He came into pretty much the combine in the beginning of the draft scouting process as, you know, a better blocking tight end than most people like. Maybe one of the better blocking tight ends in the draft. And then at the combine, he looked good as any of the tight ends during the catching drills. And that's like including Noah Fant, including TJ Hawkinson, Irv Smith, Jay Sternberger. And he had a big combine too. He ran a 4.66 40, was pretty much top 5 in all of the athletic skill testing drills. And he kind of reminds me of Mark Andrews last year. Not really in terms of play style, because Mark Andrews had some really nice production in Oklahoma. But the fact that Mark Andrews kind of came in and is like, he had a good combine and ended up actually being like the second tight end that the Baltimore Ravens drafted after they used a first-round pick on Hayden Hurst. And he was like the better tight end of the two. And I kind of knew that. I kind of felt that. I kind of stood on the table and said, I like Mark Andrews more than I like Hayden Hurst. I don't know what it was exactly, but I'm getting those vibes here with Foster Moreau. I might even want to say I put Foster Moreau ahead of Irv Smith for my third tight end in the class. Now, I'm not going to go that far because I think Irv Smith actually is a pretty decent prospect, really versatile for being an undersized tight end. But I think the fact that Foster Moreau is not clearly like the top 5 right now, it seems like he's consistently between 6 and 8 or 6 and 10 in that range. I really do think he is right there with the Noah Fants, the Hawkinsons, for in terms of value anyways. Like, clearly he's not a first-round prospect like Noah Fant or TJ Hawkinson. But that second tier, getting into the Irv Smith, Jay Sternbergers, Foster Moreau definitely needs to be in that mix. And doesn't seem to have that kind of momentum right now around the draft community or fans when their team needs a tight end, but they don't want to use that first-round pick. Not enough people are saying, hey, Foster Moreau is a prospect that we want, when in reality, he should be one. Going to number 7, I have Michael Dogbe, defensive lineman from Temple. He wasn't even invited to the scouting combine. Now, I do watch a lot of Temple football, more so than a neutral fan, more so than someone that lives outside of Philly, because obviously they're small school. I really got on that momentum that last year they had with Matt Rule, where they got that huge game at the Link against Notre Dame. That was an awesome year. I try to watch Temple when I can. And Michael Dogbe's coming off 70 tackles, 12 and a half tackles for loss, 7 sacks. And I was actually kind of shocked. He was one of my bigger omissions for players that weren't invited to the scouting combine. That's 6'3", 290 pounds. Like, he's a great, intriguing prospect in terms of, is he going to be a 3-4 end? Is he going to be, defensive tackle? Like, let's see what he can test. And he didn't even get that opportunity. Then as pro day, at almost 300 pounds, runs a 4.9 240, 34 reps on the bench press. And the fact that, in my personal opinion, I think he is right there on the cusp of being a fringe top 10 defensive lineman in a historically strong defensive line class. But if you look at most mock drafts, he's late day 3, undrafted free agent. I've seen a bunch of reputable mock drafts not even have him going if they're doing a 7th round, which is ridiculous. I think for the lack of, second, we'll jump into day 2 depth for clear 3-4 defensive lineman if you're looking for that. His name not being mentioned is pretty laughable to me. Like, even in my mock draft, I undervalued him a little bit. I think I had him going like the 5th round, which is, still kind of ridiculous when you're all considering the kind of athlete and production that he had coming out of Temple and his versatility. So I think someone's going to get a great value pick here, day 3 in Michael Dogbe. Go to number 6. I have Sutton Smith, linebacker from Northern Illinois. Because he's a tricky NFL projection, no one knows if he's too small to be an outside linebacker, but can he play outside linebacker in certain packages? Is he going to be an inside linebacker? Does he have the skill set to play inside linebacker and be able to read and dissect plays like a natural inside linebacker? Far too small to be a defensive end, or can he be a special package defensive end? But when you look at that, plus the fact that he's a slightly above average athlete, didn't test poorly at the combine, but didn't wow anybody, he's got to slip. He's going to be day 3, but his tape is unreal. He's an exciting defensive player to watch, and his production is probably the best, I would like to think, out of anyone in this year's draft class on the defensive side of the ball. In 2 years at Northern Illinois, 2 years as a starter, 120 tackles, 56 tackles for loss, 29 sacks. Like, I guarantee if you ask anyone that's says, I've been kind of poking around the draft this year, this and that, not the hardcores, probably don't even know who he is. So I think the fact that it's going to take a gamble. It's going to take a defensive coordinator that likes to think that they're creative, that think they can find a way to involve Sutton Smith, like I almost want to say like a Bill Belichick, kind of something that we saw with Kyle Van Noy. Kyle Van Noy was really misused, miscasted in Detroit, and now look, he's one of the most valuable players on that Patriots defense with Bill Belichick, pulling the strings. I think a guy like Sutton Smith can bring that value, and I hope to God, as someone that wants to see maybe a change in the guard a little bit in the AFC, a guy like Sutton Smith should absolutely scare people if we end up seeing him going to New England. Going to prospect number 5, I have Stanley Morgan Jr. from Nebraska. He really is your do-it-all wide receiver, but most people have him as a 4 to 6 grade. He has that wow catchability, some human highlight reel catches, had a pretty solid combine, running a 4.53, which is more than enough speed. The fact that he can run pretty much any route in the book, can catch the ball across the middle, has enough speed to be able to, get separation in the NFL. Maybe not be the strength of his game, but he could still bring it. I think he's going to be one of those guys that's going to be that mid-round wide receiver that ends up going to the right scheme and being really productive, getting like 500 yards and 5 or 6 touchdowns as a rookie. So there's one of those every single year, and I'm just kind of hatching my wagon to the Stanley Morgan train for him to be my sleeper wide receiver that gets a lot of production and gets on the field a lot as a rookie. Now, obviously, for some of these players, for almost all these players underrated, they are scheme dependent. I'm kind of envisioning the best case scenario, the best landing spot scenario for them to go to. But, it might happen because those teams usually have a great way of identifying players that, offer exceedingly greater value to their team versus other teams. Like, obviously, bring back to the Patriots, they continually find players that or the goddamn Saints, they got like Keith Kirkwood off the street last year, who had a pretty good pro day for Temple, and look, he had a bunch of big time plays. Like, if Stanley Morgan, just for example, goes to the Saints, watch him have a huge rookie season. Going to underrated prospect number 4, you have Rodney Anderson, the running back from Oklahoma. I'm not going to dwell on this one a lot because I've talked about him quite a bit on the channel. He might be, in my opinion, the best running back in this class, but he does have the injury tag, which is unfortunate but completely valid. But he is your prototypical NFL running back in today's climate, and the fact that he's probably going to be into day 3, he is going to be a steal. There is a big risk to reward in drafting a guy like Rodney Anderson, but the upside is there, and still, the fact that he's going to go day 3, be it is because of his injury concerns makes him underrated. I guess that could be a question, but I just think for the fact that he's going to go probably day 3, 4th round, 5th round, and has a chance to be the best running back in the class, you got to be considered underrated. Going to underrated prospect number 3, I have Jimmy Moreland, cornerback from James Madison. Again, another prospect that I've talked about extensively. He is your small school slot corner, had huge production in his last 2 years at James Madison, 12 interceptions, 31 pass breakups. He ran a 4.40 at his pro day, almost had a 40-inch vertical for his size. I think he's going to be one of these players that gets drafted 5th, 6th round and will earn the starting nickel for whatever team drafts him. Now, obviously, it is going to be team dependent because the team already has a starting nickel in place, or a good starting nickel in place. It's going to be tough to beat him out, but this is I would assume he's going to get drafted by a team that wants that open competition at that starting nickel, and I think he could have a meteoric rise, very similar to maybe say Tavon Young a couple years ago for the Baltimore Ravens at a Temple, then earn that starting slot position. In the nickel there. I think shortly after preseason, I think someone like Jimmy Moreland can follow that profile, and there's plenty of teams right now in today's NFL that are lacking a starting nickel or definitely want competition to find a starting nickel this offseason, and I think a guy like Jimmy Moreland can be that player. Going to number 2 underrated prospect, I have TJ Edwards, linebacker from Wisconsin. He is a flexible linebacker, can play in a 3-4, can play in a 4-3, and while he did have a pretty slow 40-yard dash at his pro day, which is like a 4.80, pretty much has a late day 3 to undrafted free agency grade, very similar to Cameron Smith, who we talked about. I just think, when you see these guys in the slow 40s, how many times are poor athletes at the linebacker position gonna just still defy the odds, I guess, if you will, and ended up having really productive careers and being excellent value pickups in the draft. I think someone like Cam Smith can be that. And I also think someone like TJ Edwards can do that. He's a high IQ, great tackler, can even though with that limited speed, he puts himself in the right positions. He makes up for the lack of athletic ability by being a very smart and intelligent linebacker. And in 4 years at Wisconsin, 366 tackles, 37.5 TFLs, 8 sacks, 10 picks. His coverage ability is really, really good. And anytime you get a high IQ player in the center of that defense, kind of throw the athletic expectations out the water, because if all the best athletes in the world, if you don't know how to play the football, if you don't know how to be in the right place at the right time, you're just going to get a great athlete that over pursues a lot of plays and gambles way too much. You're not going to get that with a guy like TJ Edwards, and I think he's going to have a really long NFL career and going to be an excellent day 3 value pickup. And then the number 1 underrated prospect is Darnell Savage Jr., the safety from Maryland. Currently, still, there's far too many mock drafts that have him in the 3rd round. I think, as much as I love my boy Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, he still is my number 1 safety. There is a legitimate shot that Darnell Savage has that ceiling to end up as the number 1 safety in this year's draft class. And the fact that he's consistently, mid to late day 2 at this point is ridiculous. After running a 4.36 at the combine, looking at his tape, he has some of the most exciting tape in college. He's a big-time hitter. He has great coverage ability, sideline to sideline, special teams. He's everything. He's a complete safety in today's NFL. And, you know, versus someone like maybe like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, can play a little bit more of that money backer role. That's not so much Darnell Savage's, forte. He's going to be more so that third safety, probably as a rookie that could develop into a starter at some point during his rookie year. He's just not getting enough buzz. Like, I think personally, I would probably have a first-round grade. If I was listing my top 32 prospects, Darnell Savage would probably be in that 25 to 32 range. But the fact that pretty much around the scouting community right now, he's consensus, you know, he might crack the top 50. I think that is a little bit harsh. And I'm going to stick, you know, it's the hill I'm going to die on, that Darnell Savage could emerge as the best safety in this year's draft class. And wherever he goes, he will make an impact as a rookie. Now, the only player I didn't want to put on this list because it still seems ridiculous to me was Ed Oliver. I've come out and said many of times that Ed Oliver is the best player in the draft. Ed Oliver is, you know, best player in the draft for the last like 3 years. Yet you still see mock drafts, and I get tagged every day on Twitter with, oh, C4, do you think Ed Oliver's going to slip to the Eagles at 25, or do you think he's going to slip into the top 15, this and that? And I think that's utterly ridiculous. I think personally, if I was a team that held the first, if I was the Arizona Cardinals, and we're keeping Josh Rosen, like, I'm not gonna lie, I probably would draft Ed Oliver, to be completely honest with you. So, I mean, does that make him underrated? You know, it doesn't necessarily make him an underrated prospect, because there's a lot of people that do love Ed Oliver in the community and just fans in general. So I felt like it wasn't warranted to put him on the list, but definitely talk about him at the very end. So there you go, guys, though. That is my top 10 underrated prospects for the 2019 draft. I want to hear your guys' opinions in the comment section below. Any players that I missed, any players that are your guys' favorite sleeper. You want to make that bold prediction right now, so that maybe by the end of next year, some of these guys that go, you know, second, third, fourth, fifth round end up winning like offensive rookie of the year, defensive rookie of the year, or have, you know, like we saw with some of the Colts, you know, rookies having all pro years. You might be able to refer back to this. Make your bold predictions right now. And that'll do it for me today, guys. Like I said, later in the week, we'll have the overrated list to come and follow this appropriately. So make sure you stay tuned for that. And to do that, if it's your first time stopping by and you haven't subscribed, hit that subscribe button, smash the like button if you enjoyed. And until next time, it's C4 saying peace out.